the Adventure Party on 15th of July 2022. This week, the party discussed D&D 4. Finally, the quadrilogy of movies will be complete. The Adventure Party, 16 tabletop and graded gaming, the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Savage Mick.
I'm Warlord and famed movie critic Scarr.
I'm Dave.
And as your resident Fifth Ed Hater of the Year, I'm Owen.
Well, yes, in the year I promised I would no longer talk about D&D, the fates decide otherwise and throw us a new D&D movie, which presumably the title card has already informed you our opinions about. But I've corralled the party together to talk about not just this new D&D number 4, but also previous entries in the series and maybe a couple of other side tangents, because I at least think that D&D, or fantasy role-playing in the kind of the D&D mold, has never had it so good. We've got a new movie on the way with Chris Pine, who we will discuss his wardrobe choices later. We had Stranger Things this year bringing us an arch-villain called Vecna, and it was Vox Machina, I think, late last year, which I honestly think is possibly the best representation of tabletop fantasy role-playing I've ever seen in a TV or movie. But of course, we still have D&D 4 to talk about. So, folks, you've all a chance to refresh your memories regarding this new trailer, and I threw some links to the previous entries, these 1s, 2s, 3s, into chat before we started. Any thoughts?
We've come a long way in the whole band of plucky nobodies get together to wrap up some bad guy sort of genre in this. The first trailer for the first D&D movie back in 2000. It was a shock going back to see the giant 90s style "this is no game" sort of stuff going on. We've learned some subtlety and some unsubtlety over the past 20 years of movie making, it seems.
The first D&D movie is unabashedly a classic for not the right reasons, but it is a classic. I will defend that film to the death. It is insanely watchable because it's so terrible. It is legitimately, several people chewing the scenery as much as they possibly can. You've got Jeremy Irons going nuts as I am Profion!
Let the blood rain from the sky!
It's an amazing performance.
We've got Richard O'Brien playing a demented Crystal Maze master. I mean, it's a classic. Not for necessarily for the reasons you'd want it to be a classic, but it's you can watch that film and it's
one of the
crazy.
Wayland brothers.
Yeah,
goofing around.
He does the heroic sacrifice in the film, and actually gets killed.
He's the worst.
Yeah,
although
he pulls fights the bad guy with pulling out a butter knife, basically. It's not like the pun is comedy. It's like he's pulling it out and he's going to die fighting this guy now. It's great.
Before we go any further, you've had 22 years, folks. We're spoilering everything at this point. The best thing about the first D&D movie, and there's a lot of good things, the weird chainmail choices. Bruce Payne is the henchman for Jeremy Irons. He's the blue-lipped guy. And he's, quite tellingly, the only person who returns for the second movie. This time as the big bad guy, which is nice to see someone get promoted, in a sequel.
And over the course of the film, goes from lawful good to chaotic evil.
Yeah.
There's this scene where he goes from lawful good to chaotic evil. And he's basically, after he's grabbed them all, he's like, kill them. And we're all like, lawful good. Slowly. Chaotic evil. Cool. It's lawful good. Kill them. Lawful evil. Slowly. Chaotic evil. Because he goes from being this very principled, I think almost a paladin sort of character, commander of the guard, to gets a brain parasite in his head and turns super bad guy. There's a deranged dwarf who basically talks about the importance of female dwarves having beard for something to hang on to. It's great stuff.
It's got lots of, of its time, I think. Now, it's got sub-wing commander special effects. And yeah, those haven't held up quite so well over the last 22 odd years. But enjoyable, and I think probably as good as we could expect. There's one appearance for Beholder. Kind of looks like it has been stolen from The Simpsons.
Yeah, I think it was... I wonder if that movie was the time they decided that there were smaller Beholders that didn't have anti-magic vision stuff, and there was just like guard dog.
Oh no, there was little Beholders way before that. You have a successful monster, you make some knockoffs, and D&D was not immune to that. I'm convinced there were other types of Beholder. There was eye tyrants and other bits, like four eye stock guys and that sort of thing.
They speciate here and there, yeah. Because Beholders essentially dream themselves into existence, so yeah, why not? Richard O'Brien's character, as you say, is sort of a dungeon master / crystal maze callback. I suppose which would have been very recognisable to a British audience, a UK audience for...
Oh yeah, I as soon as I saw Richard O'Brien, I knew exactly what was going on.
But why was he in this international movie that presumably had enough money to bag, a couple of recognisable...
Maybe
American
the casting director was a Rocky Horror Picture Show fan.
Or just a fan of the Crystal Maze. Someone could be like, yeah...
I seem to vaguely recall Richard O'Brien was rumoured to have quite a big part in the production or the executive team on this one. So, because I know he was also one of the head drivers behind the Rocky Horror Picture Show, with which this film obviously shares many similarities. So I think his background sort of nonce in the movie making world might have had something to do with the outsized part he has in the movie. What's really interesting is that this new movie, Dungeons & Dragons 4, Honor Among Thieves, seems to have a callback to that with its own kind of crystal maze / magic maze or trap maze sequence where we're going to see a few monsters from the monster manual.
Yeah, trapped mazes aren't unique to D&D. Well, they're fairly commonplace in D&D. Sorry, Eoin?
You're in the development team for the original D&D movie, and you've got your producers there smoking a giant cigar, going, "All right, we got dragons. We need the dungeon. And I thinks we should have a thieves guild where they're sent into this dungeon to retrieve something, and we need a fey trickstery character to be the thieves guild master. Richard O'Brien, who do you think's good for the part?" He's right there.
Darlings, I wouldn't have a clue. I couldn't imagine who it might be. Let me think for a second. Lovies. Why, I suppose if we can't find anybody else, there's always me and Mumsy. That's the last time I'll Richard O'Brien on the show. So I mean, it made a wave. This was post Lord of the Rings, wasn't it?
Oh no, contemporaries, right?
It's 2000. It was summer 2000. Yeah. I don't know if the first Lord of the Rings was 2000 or 2001. My head says it was Lord of the Rings was summer 2001.
2001 it was, yeah. Because I was remembering, this tied into 3rd edition coming out, right? Because 3rd edition PHP came out 2000. At Gen Con 2000, and I bought a copy there, which is the first D&D book I'd ever bought.
Did, and interestingly, the title, so I mean the series has never been entirely consistent, but the titles have always been sort of fascinating for me. The first one has a kind of a generically sort of fantasy title. The second movie, I think, used the same livery, the same style as 3.5 first title, and the third one I think looks like Dragon or Dungeon Siege. Looks like it's ripped the typography off from that. And there's a fair bit of borrowing here and there in the series. That first trailer, we'll post the links in the show notes, guys. That first trailer, about 2/3 of the way in, I'm pretty sure they just lift the Stargate theme tune. A few stings from that. You'll have to listen closely. But it's like, there's maybe this isn't, maybe there's a few corners being cut here. I think we got the orchestral music. We need something exciting here. Of course, the first movie, probably not a runaway success.
The first movie is actually probably the last old school fantasy movie. in that it was kind of cheap, kind of crappy, definitely never a prestige project. That was the high watermark you would get a fantasy film to.
Sitting along things like Krull, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because Lord of the Rings comes out after this, and all of a sudden a fantasy movie can be a blockbuster. There was a ceiling on fantasy films before this, and this was right at the ceiling. I went to see this in the cinema. Again, not being a big D&D fan, but I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go see it. There's not many, I guess I could watch Krull again, or Hawk the Slayer. I mean, you were not embarrassed for Thor the Destroyer. I mean, you're not embarrassed for fantasy films prior to Lord of the Rings. And after Lord of the Rings, they become a much bigger thing. It was like going to watch a superhero film. I guess, oh wow, this new film Blade's coming out. Oh man, this is awesome. This is the best comic book movie ever. I mean, that was you have to remember, stuff was a lot more ghettoized back then. And it's only in recent times that was like, oh, $400 million budget film stuffed with A-list actors. Of course, D&D would get that. No, back in the day. I mean, look at the acting or the actors you've got in D&D. You'll splash out for one big guy to be the villain, and everybody else is effectively mooks. Like look at the cast list there. The second most notable actor there is Marlon Wayans.
I mean, Tom Baker's there for like a 5-second cameo.
Yeah, you could argue between Thora Birch, Justin Whalen, but in terms of Hollywood profile, you can argue after Thora Birch and Justin Whalen at the time, both who I would struggle to tell you what they've been in since.
I only knew Justin from Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman. That's how I knew him from.
Who did he play in that?
He was Jimmy Olsen.
Oh, really? I must have missed that. Anyways, I mean, Jeremy Irons, of course, being the standout, and probably one of the most memorable things about the first movie. Great quote in there from the Warlord earlier. He brought the same energy. Jeremy Irons read the script and clearly got the assignment and decided to just go absolutely ham in this one, which is probably one of the reasons it's so beloved.
And much in the spirit of the He-Man film and Skeletor by Murray Abraham. No, it's not Murray Abraham, sorry, it's Frank Langella.
Oh, Frank Langella playing Skeletor.
Yeah.
One of his favourite roles.
Yes.
To this day, in interview, he's described how much fun he had playing Skeletor. And honestly, it's one of the reasons I love the movie so much. But there's my thoughts on how the live-action He-Man should have gone are perhaps for another time.
But that was how it worked. I mean, you got the kind of the middling budget to low budget film, and you got in it wasn't a big ensemble cast of brilliant actors. It was usually something, quite okay. Get a bunch of unknowns, and we'll get one charismatic theatre actor to play the villain, and he'll be the best part of the film. And that was the gameplay,
Am I misremembering that Max von Sydow was something in Flash Gordon? Was he?
Yeah, that's how they did it. That was the old formula. It was, we'll have a kind of we'll make something for the Keach crowd, the thing crowd, and we'll get one theater actor who can really anchor the whole thing, and he'll play the villain. And then we'll get a bunch of kind of maybe up-and-comers who may never resolve properly, and we'll throw them in and see if they can do anything with it. A lot of kind of lowish budget sci-fi films are like that.
Take a gamble on them.
Yeah, which there's ones that aren't, which are a bit more of an ensemble cast. But like, if you look at Battle Beyond the Stars, which is a classic, again, dodgy, but classic, you'll see a bunch of kind of, I kind of know him, or I kind of know him. Kind of, almost theirs, and that's a bit more of an ensemble cast. It actually has 2 or 3 recognizable TV actors in it.
Okay, well, speaking of, the only actor to carry over from D&D 1 into D&D 2 was, of course, Bruce Payne, who, if you've watched the movie, is the blue-lipped henchman to Jeremy Irons, or the paladin who, he goes from lawful good to chaotic evil. The second movie, probably not as many people have seen it 6 years later.
I haven't.
Obviously, this is post all of the Lord of the Rings stuff, which has now swept the fantasy world. And as Owen's pointed out, D&D 1 is kind of a capstone on an era of this kind of movie. But the D&D 2 movie, Wrath of the Dragon God, is kind of ploughing in sort of the same furrow, but of course with less money now and less exposure. Does it stand up?
I looked at the trailer there. It does definitely have that sort of direct-to-video feel to it.
Oh yeah, pretty much. It was released in Europe, some parts of North America, and largely a DVD release. It's hard, I suppose, at this point, grabbing the coattails of, hey, Lord of the Rings is doing really well. Let's put out another fantasy adventure movie. That'll probably get us some money. So as the budgets go down, of course, the fidelity to the source material seems to go up, because this time we have some pretty clear call-outs to the game, where you're looking at heroes who represent some of the core attributes of D&D: intelligence, wisdom, strength, being kind of labelled as such in the narrative, and then being sent up against a recurring villain. This Bruce Payne, this time taking on the lead ham actor role. More understated than Jeremy Irons, has to be said. Apart from the blue lips, probably not that memorable. I'm pretty sure I saw this one, but I couldn't tell you much about it. Anyone else?
I think I've seen it, but again, I could not remember it. But I do recall, well, I do vaguely remember, it is, they were increasingly, this is actually a D&D film, rather than they were tapping into this is what's in the world. And again, a bunch of a large number of actors that you probably never heard of.
Oh yeah, although some of them do become more prominent later in the career, and probably don't like to be asked about this movie so much. I mean, the cast in the second one, Bruce Payne has mentioned. I'm just looking at the list of people here for someone I recognise. It's a short list. Not a lot of Eastern European actors who are probably standing around at the casting calls who get involved. Watching the trailer, you see a few people like Tim Stern and Mark Diamond, who are sort of vaguely recognisable. You've seen them in a lot of TV work since then, but it's not exactly a stellar cast.
I mean, a lot of these sort of actors would be going to the movies, partly just to get work, but also to make connections. Like it's not so much about that. It has been my dream to play Varala the Rogue Fighter in the D&D 2 movie. No, it's more about I want to get to know this director or these casting crew or this production team, so that my name is out there a bit more. That's why a lot of these things for. Don't knock work for hire work.
I know a lot of actors who work in theatre and sort of sideline and other things. I know a guy who's one of the main characters on Roster Run for Tina G, which is an Irish language show, and they'll all tell you exactly the same thing. You work wherever the work is. One of them related to me that some of the highest paid gigs he's done is role-playing patients for doctor training. So, not exactly headlining stuff, but he says that the money's great, so he's more than happy to pretend he's got cysts or glaucoma. Right. So...
But one of the things that sort of come up with that is the idea of connection, and that as the directed DVD movies went on, they went more and more into little overall things, like to say the strength, charisma stuff in number 2. I think number 3 actually stars a very deep cut dragon enemy who's actually kind of obscure in the lore.
Yeah, well, I mean even the byline for number 3, the Book of Vile Darkness, is a reference to an item in a classic D&D lore.
But none of them are actually set until number 4, Dragons 4, Honor Among Thieves. Until then, none of them are actually set in an official setting. There was nothing tying them to Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or anything like that. They were just set in generic fantasy land. And the lore stuff or rulesy stuff that being referenced was just that. It's like, what's in the player's handbook? Oh, it's the Dimension Door spell, the 6 statistics. And then there's one person who has a broken up copy of the Draconomicon, and he says, "What's a chronepsis?" But there's no like definitional ties to a given piece of what we might call intellectual property, perhaps deliberately, so that there will be no ambiguity. This tiny production company in Poland suddenly has movie rights to a bunch of WotC's product identity or whatever it's called.
I'd say that's true. Yeah, the third one is a bit more grounded. Like Pelor the god is mentioned. The Shadowfell comes into it. There's a few other.
They've got an evil party in this one. The party is a bunch of bad guys: Shatterkai Sorceress, Human Assassin, Goliath Barbarian, Human Vermin Lord.
By the third one, it's a direct-to-DVD production and
released in the UK.
Released in the UK, and they lean even, and it does look like sort of sub-Xena production value.
Yeah.
But again, even more authentically D&D. I'm looking at a quote here. When IGN reviewed the second movie, they only give it a 3 out of 10, stating that it was only hardcore D&D fans should check it out, mostly due to references to the game itself. So the mainstream kind of critics didn't like the more D&D aspects of the D&D movies, which is kind of annoying. This is why make this rather than some other generic thing.
Oh God, man, they would love to see this nowadays. 20 years into the Marvel glut or something, they'd be begging for something like this. Anything different.
Anything else? So Evil Party in the third one, Book of Vile Darkness, and, obviously, there's evil and there's evil. There's haha, moohoo, we're out for ourselves, and then there's destroy the world evil. That's where I keep all my stuff, so our evil party become the heroes. I watched the trailer, and there's some guy painted up in grey and black. Is he meant to be a Goliath?
Probably a Goliath, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That was their look, because they were like, "Oh, we're bigger. We're not large and medium, but we're a powerful build." Or
were they not long out at that stage in the actual?
They would have been would have been out a while at that stage.
I believe Races of Stone was 2006 or so.
Oh yes,
and I think they would have been at some point put into 4th edition, which would be in the current edition at the time of the movie. So
that's the production company again, probably not working with a lot of money, but leaning heavily into what makes D&D D&D, even if, as the Warlord has pointed out, they're not strictly grounding it in one of the settings, which I think is probably the best place to now jump into the just released trailer for Dungeons & Dragons 4 Honor Among Thieves, because it's definitely in the same movie series, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, it's just number 4. Like, it's basically like Star Wars, right? Previously we had... The first one was the apex of old school fantasy. And then the next two were increasingly Sci-Fi Channel, direct to DVD. I need a film and I don't want to spend a lot of money. Let's go film it in Bulgaria or somewhere else where, laws are forgiving and the tax breaks are generous.
SAG can't get us.
Yeah, this is the one which has taken the Marvel playbook, run it through an AI script generator, and resulted in this.
We've only got the trailer to go on
at
the moment. I have to say, lots of things. I mean, I don't disagree with any you've just said. However, I think the production team are clearly paying attention. I've seen lots of little things, just watching the trailers back and looking at some of the character promo stuff they released, that indicates that whoever is at the helm of this thing at least understands some of the kind of the trappings of D&D and what should show up and where.
The monsters look like D&D monsters,
and there's so many of them. That's probably the highlight for me. In the trailer we've seen, we've got a grey ooze, I think, some sort of ooze. We've got a displacer beast, my absolute favourite. We have a dragon, of course, perhaps even more than one kind. There's 2 dragons. We get a black dragon.
It looks like a very overweight red dragon as well.
Yeah, which could be a fairly deep cut. I've encountered some overweight red dragons in my time. And, of course, an owlbear. And not only is an owlbear, it's a druid who's shapeshifted into an owlbear, which is the most cracked D&D in the current age. Like, druids are broken, everyone knows this. But owlbears are awesome, and to see a main character who's going to also be an owlbear is kind of cool. And a tiefling, so we're hitting lots and lots of specific D&D stuff.
Usually one of the most controversial parts of the new trailer is that technically Owlbear's character's monstrosity is not his beast, and therefore rules as written cannot. That seems to be the big controversy.
The raw crowd are always going to have a field day with anything like this. So raspberries to them.
My question about that one is everyone's like, oh, don't worry, I'll let you play an owlbear as some little, thumbs up, I'm a good DM. I'm like, okay, are you just going to have... My question will be, is the owlbear going to be statted like a brown bear then, or are you going to get the owlbear stats? Because I don't have a problem because an owlbear is mechanically identical to a brown bear, except it's got more AC, more damage, and more hit points. If you want to shapeshift into a brown bear that looks like a mechanical brown bear that just looks like an owlbear, yeah, whatever. If you want to shift into a CR3 monster, yeah, no.
I thought you could be if you were a moon druid and you were level 9 or something.
Probably if you're but these people were trying to do it at level 3, Shane. Do not lie to yourself.
I'm sure someone's released a prestige class. What are they called now? Not prestige classes, but subclass that allows them to do that. And I nearly forgot. We have not a doppelganger, a chest beast thing, a mimic. We see a mimic as well, a chest mimic, a classic. And in that, what appears to be that callback to Richard O'Brien's sort of comedy showcase, what do you call it? TV show dungeon thing. There's some sort of Thieves Guild dungeon going on with Hugh Grant overseeing proceedings this time as the recognisable Brit.
Again, going with the well-trained British actor to anchor the film for you.
Yeah, and very, as you said, the Marvel playbook, he really does seem to be doing what the guy from The Fly and Jurassic Park was doing in Thor Ragnarok. Jeff Goldblum. Yeah. He really, it looks like he's probably only going to be in the movie for about 5 minutes.
I mean, I like the fact that they've got a female character who, playing against type, is a tough fighter. We've never seen that before in films.
Except
never.
In the 3 previous movies.
Never. Never in the history of cinema have we had a character who's unpredictably strong.
In fairness, it is Michelle Rodriguez who has plenty of form in this arena, and at least sort of seems to have enough muscles to carry it. We got the first D&D movie had this, didn't it? There was like the female.
She was a ranger, I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and it has become something of a trope.
Yeah, absolutely. You've also actually got a redhead playing the tiefling, which is nice.
Is that significant?
Oh, it's nice to see,
For a bit of variety.
Basically.
Bargain basement Black Widow, as I referred to the first time I saw her. She's got this awful... There's some character promo shots. They're kind of cheesy. But this sort of... Each of the characters is a kind of a swirl. And she kind of swirls around and releases what I think is a tooth from a wrist-mounted catapult. Which I'm glad they kind of played up the owlbear aspect of her character rather than wrist-mounted catapult.
Is that an Equilibrium reference? Are we referencing Cronenberg movies now?
Are you thinking of the Existence?
Yeah, Existence.
Oh, Existence.
That's right.
The gun put together from like fish parts or what looked like fish parts.
That's how good I am, ladies and gentlemen. That's how good I am. He named the wrong film, but as soon as he said tooth from a projectile launcher, I knew what he was going for.
I can't imagine why they'd make that link, but it's a very deliberate thing to have her launch out of a catapult, especially one mounted to her wrist. We'll see. And she's got those dinky little horns. We've got an elf sorcerer or something in there. There's one guy who there's magic items that are... I can't name them, but they're I'm pretty sure they're canon magic items. There's a sort of a diadem or some sort of headband of power that's casting a spell, and someone launches a sword off of its hilt, and they're left with a knife or a dagger in their hand. I don't know if that's a real D&D thing. It's pretty goddamn goofy, though.
So basically, Star-Lord, Gamora, Black Widow, Anthony Mackie, Captain America, and some nerd are your protagonists.
Yeah, it's a gang of thieves. They're all on a heist.
And the Collector is your bad guy. it's grand. It will be Marvel, like mid-tier Marvel film. Because I mentioned this script writing book where it saved the cat, right? This is the playbook. And you get a perfectly average film out of it. You will hit some high points, and maybe individual performances or individual work will raise it up a little bit, but you will get a kind of it's fine, it's grand, completely inoffensive. That was good. I enjoyed that. Some people will be crying and weeping and beating themselves in the head in the cinema, but most people will be like, yeah, it was grand.
Any dramatic tension will be instantly undercut by a joke.
Yes, exactly.
And we'll have spent a good portion of the money on the soundtrack.
Yeah. Also, the world is definitely completely a threat. Every single world, everywhere at once.
Yes, in a world.
Yeah.
In an
like that is the new one. Instead of any personal stakes have to be involved, the world has to be
its entire world.
Every world, everywhere, every multiverse is at risk because of this thing. Immediately, the whole thing.
I'd contest that we haven't seen the bad guy for this movie. I don't think it's going to be Hugh Grant. First of all, I don't think he's strong enough actor to carry that, or even really.
Are you saying there's going to be a 40-foot tall CGI creation voiced by a famous actor?
Yeah, just
who's going to be yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. And it'll be Vecna's bigger brother or something. So this one definitely takes place in the Forgotten Realms, right? We see Waterdeep in the opening shot of the trailer.
If you got concept art already done for you, why pay to make it?
Absolutely, yeah. Do we think they'll stick to it? Will this be a heavily referenced Forgotten Realms movie?
I don't know. We haven't seen anyone cast as Elminster, although I suspect there'll be some mysterious man with a pipe, in the background of some shot, just to poke the fans. But the impression I got with the all-new cast, and, are they going to be connected to anyone or anything?
It's been a while since the last one, so they had to get an all-new cast. Honestly, dream casting for Elminster would probably be someone like, I don't know, The Rock. Can you just imagine that eyebrow and the beard?
I've always imagined, Elminster more like the Steven Seagal of the Forgotten Realms.
Oh, God, no. Like,
overweight, but inexplicably powerful. Everyone just stepping into his moves as he gingerly karate chops them out of the way.
Pretty much like that.
Elminster's kind of an ass, but he's not Steven Seagal levels, I think.
Can I just point something out, actually? In terms of casting, just before we go there, can I just point out, no Asian casting that I've seen in this, which is unusual for a movie with any kind of budget in the 2020s, given that the Asian market is huge, or at least Hollywood thinks it is. Isn't that unusual? I know I don't want to sort of go all the way down that rabbit hole, but it's worth noting.
Do you want to get into the politics of what counts as diversity and what doesn't?
No, not today.
No, I don't think you do.
You hear me, brother. You hear me.
Yeah. Look.
Bold move. No Asians.
It's the way it works. You can look up the guidelines. It's pretty cynical. It
is, yeah. I thought I'd note it. Anyway, Owen, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, I saw some people saying that they thought this was going to be a huge gateway for people into the hobby. I'm significantly less convinced. I think a lot of the people who were there already are going to be there for this, and for everyone else, they're selling it as a Marvel film. And the superhero crew are going to go in and watch this, and it is going to be effectively, it's playing off the Marvel playbook, which is a respectable playbook that earns people a lot of money. And it could well be grand. Like, I'll probably go, I won't go to the cinema to watch it because I don't go to the cinema anymore, but I will watch it when it shows up on a streaming service. And that's fine. My other thing I was going to wonder about was when they said the main hero was a bard, I was very interested to see how they'd handle bard song, which is kind of a super goofy ability when you think about it, if you don't make it kind of explicitly magical. Like, if it's this guy strumming his lute and singing as you're fighting, and it's not magic.
Could you imagine if this breaks out into a musical number about 40 minutes in? Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, because like these people, some of these are triple threats. I know some of these people have done musical theatre. Like, if they actually went, like, because Zaitachi does it at the very end, which is kind of cool. Does Iron Fist? No, maybe. There's sometimes a musical number just happens, and I'm fine with that. If it happened in a D&D movie, I'd lose my mind. It'd be amazing, especially with a bard.
Yeah. Now, like, is he going to bop into an acoustic version of some metal song?
Oh, absolutely.
On the lute while everyone's fighting?
It'll be something the boomers will recognise. 100%.
That's what my first... Are you going to do a big sequence? Is he going to be the soundtrack of all the big sequences? Like, basically standing in the background playing his lute like a lunatic while everyone else fights.
Just riffing out like Eddie Munson.
Yeah, I mean, you can make that look okay.
Yeah, you could. I think I'd say you do it once, you call it back once, and then you get Chris Pine back to rolling and fighting and slashing away.
To replicate the D&D experience, he has to do it every fight. If it's going to be Lorac, it's this guy just there going... Do. Also, like, in the thing, he's like, I make the plans in the Star-Lord way of making the plans. And I'm like, you're a cat, class mate. You ain't making no plans.
I like that sequence in the trailer. I make plans, well then we're done with you. We don't need you. No, when the plans fail, I make other plans. So you make plans that fail. Okay, we got a problem. That's it. That's an exchange.
He's playing the boob in it, which is fine. There's room for the Jack Burton, if you will, of the piece.
He was happy enough to do it in Wonder Woman. And people loved him for it, so yeah, why not?
You know, Wonder Woman, where she took on the Nazis. Set during World War One, took on the Nazis.
Hush now, Nazis. It's all we ever fight in Europe is Nazis. Just ask Putin. Right. Okay, so look, I think my takeaway from this is production design-wise looks very authentic. I mean, the Displaced Beast looks like a goddamn Displaced Beast. No allowances, no deviations. And I'm happy with that. The Owlbears get depicted in a lot of different ways, but that one looked solid to me. And dragons be dragons. They're pretty easy to do. We've had TV special effects guys working on dragons for the last 10 years. They've got them down pat.
Wyvern style dragon or Western dragon, actually? Because Wyvern style is the nice, lazy one.
Well, they had a wyvern in the third movie. I don't know if they'll call back to that quite so quickly in the fourth. I love how we're pretending there's any continuity.
Yeah, because the wyvern, you just mocap bats. Whereas if you want to do an actually four-legged dragon with wings, you've got to do a whole lot of extra work.
You've got way more work. It's more rigging. So this, speaking of callbacks and fidelity, the title for this is Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, and it is the Dungeons & Dragons... I think it is the 5th ed livery that they've used, the typography. So it's unabashedly tying it to the current role-playing game, which I kind of think is cool, that they haven't gone with a generic font, or they haven't just gone with Helvetica or something.
Although it'll be coming out only a few months before the 50th anniversary edition of the game.
Yeah, so there's that strikes me as a strong, unafraid, unabashed tie-in, albeit through the lens of how to make a Marvel movie. Okay, so before we close out with a couple of thoughts on where else we've seen D&D lately, any other sort of takes on this trailer? We don't know too much about the movie, except it's going to be middle of the road, I think. Will this reignite people's interest in D&D?
I will say my first impression when watching the trailer for the new one, this looks a lot like First Night.
Yeah, with James Franco.
Yeah. I enjoyed First Night. It was a good romp, but yeah, I not expect it. Like, my expectations of films in general are pretty low. So I'll leave my takes at that.
I'm not terribly impressed by Chris Pine's costume. I don't think it's. I think it is far too. You could get away with wearing this in the modern day.
Oh, if you took some of the buckles off, it just looks like Chris Pine going to the shops. It's like absolutely. He clearly, the costume fittings, they put a pauldron on him, and he was just like, "No, I'm not wearing this. I'm not dealing with it."
Like, why doesn't he have the world's most billowy shirt, like a comedically billowy shirt? Like, I'm talking puffy to the point of you can barely see the guy.
it's crawling up around his ears.
I'm just saying, like, it's a disappointment to me because everyone else is like, okay, I can kind of see it, but they are very kind of, let's tone down these robes and stuff, guys.
Yeah, because the rest of them are in sort of foam armor kind of. The costumes aren't great, I have to say.
They're fine. They're superhero costumes with a fantasy twirly. And that's fine. It's like that's
called Dungeon Punk, isn't it? Or
can people stop attaching punk to something that has nothing to do with the punk ethos? God Almighty!
That's what you do when you're talking about fashion in a thing.
Etymology. I know anything can mean anything, but people used to give a damn about etymology.
Maybe this is a topic for another episode.
Honestly, so the costumes that I've seen do look like some of the sort of more middle-of-the-road efforts of people who go to Comic-Con. There's nothing that particularly stands out about them. They certainly don't look like stuff from, say, the Warhammer movie, which, man, those shoulder pads, they were something. No, Warcraft, you're right.
We have not been blessed by a Warhammer movie.
No, which would just be so full of English actors as to look like a Royal Shakespeare production with about the same amount of plate mail. Right, okay, so I think we're all pretty lukewarm on the movie, but it doesn't look like it's going to embarrass us either. Fair enough. No,
it's going to be fine. I could be shocked and it could be amazing. I don't think it's going to be amazing. I think they've gotten the art of making a trailer down to a science instead, and they are hitting. Let's take a classic rock or metal song. We'll do either a regular or an instrumental version of that. We'll put it over the track. We'll do a bunch of cool action sequences. They can zoom, do slow motion dives and everything like this. This is our trailer stuff. We'll kind of spoil the gist of the plot because...
Yeah, it's a heist. It's not exactly complicated. I don't think they've shown us the bad guys, and perhaps the bad guys aren't even going to be that interesting. I don't think there's a big name attached, although I haven't looked at the cast list.
There's going to be a bunch of action sequences you will struggle to remember after the film is done.
Choreography is tough. Modern cinema choreography has become an issue. Okay, better representations or at least I think this could be a good one, but honestly, one of the things I highlighted at the top of the show was that we're in a pretty good place for seeing, quotes, D&D on TV and in movies. I honestly think that Stranger Things has done a huge amount to elevate the sort of the awareness of D&D, certainly the brand recognition, the name awareness. Latest season of Stranger Things, obviously the bad guy has the moniker of Vecna, if not exactly mapping onto the D&D villain. I still think Vox Machina, which is the Critical Role cast, doing their version of D&D, and it's now an official setting, so I guess it's official D&D on the screen. But that first season was perhaps the best representation of fantasy role playing. It's not set. It's not exactly D&D. Because the script captures that pathos and comedy aspect of playing at a table with your friends and swapping very quickly between these sort of tones that I think I've ever seen, and sort of gets what's fun about role playing across in a very organic way. Has anyone else seen it?
Haven't, but I noticed that Stranger Things, while not a D&D not all about D&D, certainly brings it up a fair bit, and apparently is one of the most streamed shows at all. Like, it was something like the second show to get over 1 billion streams on Netflix. So the word's getting out that way as well.
Yeah, exposure, absolutely. The name recognition is out there for D&D, or for Dungeons & Dragons, and perhaps that'll lead people to all the other excellent aspects of role-playing.
I feel doesn't get enough credit these days. I think the old D&D cartoon from the late 80s, like, I feel like that has got way more cultural attaché than any of the 2000s movies did. Because it still gets referenced every so often in official D&D products. Like, I'm pretty sure those poor lost kids made a cameo in Witch Beyond the Woodlight or something.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting for official stats on Hank's bow. Has that been published anywhere?
It was a brilliant longbow. I think of +3 brilliant longbow.
I won't deny it, Scarr. You're absolutely right. I mean, big impression on us 90s kids. It was a great show. Had a lot of heart. and was sort of quite a funny sort of cast of characters with classes that wouldn't necessarily be terribly recognisable to some people today, such as the acrobat. But yeah, so there's a as yet sort of undetailed D&D TV show in the offing. It was announced in February 22. No details on it yet, but how kind of amazing would it be if it was to somehow reprise or revisit the premise of the cartoon?
Fantasy TV shows are hard.
Yeah, nothing easy in this, brother.
Yeah, they're hard. You can look at the recent adaptations of The Wheel of Time and the upcoming adaptations of Lord of the Rings, for example, of how hard they're going to be.
Yeah, I think if you have to kind of strip it back and maybe avoid strapping so many secondary and tertiary messages to TV shows. Like TV shows can be complicated, but they should probably have a direct line through them that audiences could follow, even if they're not watching every episode.
Very quickly, it can end up looking like a Ren Fair.
In fair, those kids did not exactly fill their costumes in the original show. What was the name of the barbarian? I'm trying to remember. With Uni the unicorn.
Oh yeah. Yuli was the unicorn. Bobby.
That's like your kid brother is the strongest party member. This great big club. Live action that'd be a bit too goofy. I think we still live in the shadow of things like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, in that everything has to be epic and serious and political, which is perhaps not what we're craving at this point.
The thing is, I feel like, it might be difficult to sell in this world of streaming seasons and TV binging, but I think one of the big strengths of, previous things is like the ability to go episodic, and rather than put all your effort into this 13 episode epic which has a budget for 5 episodes, we could go back to maybe try a more episodic format. Like, people like Cena. They have fond memories of the attempts at mid-level episodic stuff.
One of the mistakes I think is commonly made is to try and explain the entire setting right at the start.
The lore dump, yeah, it can be tough.
Yeah, what should be... they're playing the game wrong. Much like current D&D has forgotten exploration as a pillar, you need to actually go and actually have a series explore the setting slowly. Don't explain everything. Don't have a stupid voiceover at the start. You basically you explain as you go along with it. You start people right in the middle and let them explore the setting. I thought The Witcher was actually pretty strong at that.
Yeah, pretty good. But it's one of the strengths of Vox Machina. Yeah, it just spirals out, so the world gets bigger as you spend more time with the characters. And yeah, never, you don't have to dump lore.
And I think you have to go, you guys are going to have to keep up with this. But that is, media is allergic to relying on viewers' intelligence. They assume their viewers are dumb and can't follow things and find everything hard to explain. And everybody is that person who, watching the same TV shows, like, who's that? What is she doing? What's this going on? They assume that is every viewer.
Well, we all know one.
Yeah.
One. Okay, Dave, any final thoughts on D&D in the media?
Yeah, there's been a bunch of attempts with varying levels of success, and I imagine if this does, reasonably well, it'll get a sequel, maybe a TV show, regardless of how difficult it is to do a TV show well. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see more D&D offerings in the near future. Yeah, that's it.
Fingers crossed. Okay, folks, thanks for listening along. Play along at home by watching the trailers for the 4 current D&D movies in the series. And let us know what you think. We've clearly missed a whole bunch. We didn't touch on things like Tunnels and Trolls with Tom Hanks from back in the day. Perhaps not the best representation of D&D, but there's a few others out there. We'd love to hear from you in our Discord. Check the link in the show notes. And hey, post up any trailers or any other snippets you come across, and we can compare notes on best D&D on TV. Right, so that's been me, Savage Mick.
I've been Scarr, and I give this trailer a thumb sideways.
I continue to be Dave. It looks fine.
And I'm still Owen. Hate on Fifth Ed, kids. Hate on Fifth Ed.
And with that, this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike of version 3 license.